Welcome to the Falling Off the Floor podcast. I'm your host, Austin Becker, and this is your home for adventure, travel, addiction, recovery, the outdoor and ski industry, and of course, redemption. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Falling Off the Floor podcast. This week, we have a special guest. I'm here in Washington, D.C., seeing some family and doing some work stuff, and a good friend of mine, Margaret.
Hey.
She lives here in DC, and you know what? I'm going to let you, I normally try and introduce people into the podcast, and you know what? I'm going to let you do your thing, Margaret.
Well, first, I think I'm going to say I'm probably the first person you've had on here who's never skied or snowboarded, so yeah. Apologies in advance, guys. Yeah, I have a really crazy wild background, and I'm very grateful to be friends with Austin, but grew up in the Northeast, studied weaving as a child. I was a basket weaver and made friendship bracelets and was really into the textiles industry. And so in college, literally studied on a floor loom. I don't know if you know that.
I did not know that.
Majored in textiles and weaving.
Wow.
And so coming out of college, I was like, okay, I'm not going to sit on a loom for the rest of my life because my back will die. But I'm going to go into the fashion industry because that seems like a natural transition. So initially went into the fashion industry and was at Tory Burch and Victoria's Secret on their creative teams. Transitioned out of that and was at Gray Advertising and was running events for their agency of 1,000 people all in New York. And really just burnt out on New York, thinking that I wanted to live there for the rest of my life. And it was too much for me and too urban. And like skyscrapers and black and gray everywhere. And I'm obviously a very color heavy. Yeah. And so I couldn't get into the New York thing. So
you're from the New York area, correct?
I am. I'm from right outside New York. So I thought that was my dream forever, right? It was you graduate and you move to New York City. I'm going to live there forever. I'm going to be on the 42nd floor of some building. And then I was doing it and I was like, I really like having laundry in unit and a dishwasher. And that's just not possible here. So
unless you're paying $40,000 a month.
I was about to say, what, like $8,000 a month-ish, give or take?
Yeah.
Even then, I mean, still luxury.
Still a luxury.
So I really randomly moved down to DC.
Okay.
And had a background in art from school, and so got picked up by this hospitality group as a food photographer and was in-house basically running between restaurants all over the East Coast and taking photos of food and getting to run their social media, and it was fun as fuck.
Yeah.
And did that for 2 years. And then during that time started something called DMC, Deep Meaningful Conversations, which was a discussion group and community in DC that we grew from two of us being like, maybe this is a cool idea, to 200 people. And we would just gather in a living room and hang out and talk about things like friendship breakups and defining the concept of home and all these different ideas. And from that, really started to get more into facilitation and working with people.
Yep.
Ended up getting a photography job abroad with a digital nomad company called Hacker Paradise and moved to South America and was supposed to be there taking photos. And on the 7th day on the trip, the facilitator quit and they were like, cool. You are now responsible for 40 entrepreneurs. Please develop programming for them and we'll see you in a year. And I was like, fuck. So lived between Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, and Uruguay and ran these retreats and was really thrown to the wolves on learning programming and facilitation.
Yeah.
And moved back to the US, briefly back into the hospitality industry with Kava on their marketing team. And then the pandemic happened and I full sidetracked and kind of... Yeah, so basically moved from this marketing industry into the people industry. So I thought I wanted to be a therapist and applied to school for that. The pandemic kind of, with the Zoom classes, I put it off for a year and ended up studying under a bunch of executive coaches. Moved out to Colorado where I met Austin, briefly went to Naropa for therapy and then got poached by an entrepreneurial membership and retreat group called Summit Series to be an executive coach for them. Ended up running their program and developing, personal and professional development programs for entrepreneurs. And then was with them for a long time, moved back to DC, worked for a hotel running all of their programming. And now I'm with a group called Hampton who are incredible. Running all of their East Coast programming and community. So a lot of different things. A
Yeah.
lot of different things. Like
Seriously.
I'm the quintessential multi-hyphenate. So
Yeah. I feel like I've known you several years now. And I didn't
through
even-
several chapters too. Yeah.
Through several chapters. I didn't even know, like, the South America thing I didn't know about. That's pretty incredible. How did that even come to be?
Okay, so the reality is I was like a 21-year-old sitting in the Victoria's Secret offices, which I like. We were in cubicles. It's not as sexy as it sounds. Like
Yeah.
it was very, very New York cubicle life. And I like just had this dream coming from, you know, being at an art school. I was like, this can't be what life is like sitting in cubicles. This is miserable.
Yeah.
And so against who I am as a person. And I heard about Remote Year, which was pretty brand new at the time, which was this thing where you could like travel to 12 different countries.
Oh, wow.
Over the course of a year. It was like a month in each country, and you just needed a remote job. And I heard about this, and I immediately was like, I must go.
Yeah.
I have to be there. But
yeah.
at the time, marketing jobs, like it was unheard of that they were remote. I mean, this was in like 2015, 2016. And so I had this idea of like, well, what if I worked for the company and then I got paid to do the travel and I just did their marketing?
Yeah.
So that was sitting in the back of my mind for years, and I tracked all those companies, but there was just like so rarely an open position.
Yeah.
And I finally like found this one with Hacker Paradise and applied and put together this video where I'm like playing ukulele and taking photos and like all this wild shit. And they were like, you're funny. Like we're down, we're in. And I was like, sick. So I was originally supposed to be an intern for like 2 months as a photographer. And then, you know, the game kind of changed as soon as I was on the ground. So it was a journey.
Wow. That's very Margaret.
It is.
Of you.
It is.
Yeah, that's very Margaret. So you're back in DC now.
Mm-hmm.
You've been here for a little bit, and you're nomadic just like I am. We were talking a little bit before the podcast. What's next steps? You're thinking about traveling a little bit and getting out of the metro area, and
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know how you feel about this. I oscillate all the time between wanting to be in a city and be in the middle of things, especially as someone who is so ambitious and wanting to be like what's going on and talking to other entrepreneurs, and then wanting to be like in the middle of a forest with no one around me for 6 miles. I swing both directions. Like during the pandemic, I did spend 3 months alone on an island with no one around me for a couple miles, and I had a Bernese mountain dog, and we would just hike every day, and it was amazing.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah, we miss Charlie.
Yeah, we miss Charlie.
And yeah, I just like, I want both. And so all of that to say, I think after a year and a half being pretty rooted here, especially because my last role was not remote, I'm like ready for another round of kind of like immersing in nature.
Yeah.
So figuring out what that looks like in a way that still has working Wi-Fi so I can
Yeah. Well,
Work.
like I was saying, you got to do Starlink. It is.
I know, I've been hearing that.
Yeah,
It's
Starlink is actually incredible.
I've had 3 people recommend it now because I posted on my story being like, guys, I want to be in the middle of nature. What do I do? Like, can I
Yeah.
work from a hammock somewhere?
Yeah. We were just down deep in the desert, like 100 miles from civilization in the
so
wide
awesome.
open Utah desert. No connection
I love
to
the
anything.
Utah desert.
And thank God my buddy Chai shows up and he's like, oh, I got a Starlink. My car broke down. There's no roads. Like, we're driving through the open desert.
Oh my God.
My car breaks down in the open desert, and thank God Chai had Starlink. He's like, oh, no problem. We'll get you connected in no time. Puts the thing on top of the car, connects to a satellite, and we had like almost like 500 megabytes a second internet in the middle of nowhere. Like, phone wasn't even saying like
Technology is crazy, man. Like,
Yeah.
what era are we in?
Elon Musk. He's not only terrifying, Elon Musk. His terrifying ideas tend to work out. Because
Did someone come get you in the middle of the desert?
No, I fixed my car. It was crazy.
Did you look up on YouTube how to fix it?
Well, to a certain extent. So I broke my control arms, like bent them, which essentially, I know you're probably not.
I know. I'm like, you're already out of my language, but we're here for it.
The cars tilt, or the wheels tilt back and forth.
Okay.
And they get cambered with a control arm.
Okay.
So I bent the control arm, so the wheel was totally sideways and
perfect.
rubbing against my suspension. So This was crazy. But I took apart a jet boil for food.
As one does.
And used the hot flame torch coming out of the jet boil and heated up the control arm that was bent like
there's
a V.
Margaret things. That's like such an Austin thing.
Yeah. I heated...
Pull my camping gear out to fix it.
Yeah, pulled it apart, got the heat on the control arm in the middle of the Utah desert, and we lowered the car onto a jack that the jack was on the control arm and used the weight of the car and the heat to bend the control arm back, and sure, I couldn't believe this shit fucking worked. The wheel just starts turning and gets straight. Varun, who you're going to meet this evening, he flew out from here, DC, to go on this trip and was, oh my God, this is crazy. He was freaking out. He called his family in India and was like, my friend Austin got the car working in the middle of the desert. He was like blown away that we pulled this thing off. It was a group effort. But somehow, with the
10
power
out of 10 scrappy.
Yeah, 10 out of 10. And then I drove it 9 hours home. Yeah, I was not, there was no chance in hell.
This is the shit I miss about like Colorado and Utah. It's just nonsense like
look,
this.
I'm not going to call a tow truck and we'll get it to Denver. I put in cruise control at 50 and I
spent too much time on the East Coast. People are like, I don't want to deal with it. Get the tow truck. Like,
the tow truck comes here to pick up your car to take it to the shop. Yeah, that's East Coast life.
It is.
So you're thinking about doing this nomadic thing. You love the role right now. It's called Hampton?
Hampton, yeah.
What does your role entail right now in terms of like the community events? What are the sort of things that you're putting on?
So I'm kind of known in my industry for like weird stuff, like weird bespoke events, which is like my kind of bread and butter. So
Your
what
forte.
that looks like, yes. I love out there, like, I like kind of being interesting and different. And I think if people can walk away from an event with a story versus like, I mean, there's a million entrepreneur panels, right? Like interesting people talking.
For sure.
And the best story you might have is like somebody on the panel said something interesting that you're reflecting on. But I like when people walk away and they're like, I went to the weirdest fucking event. It was so cool. So for example, next week we're partnering with a celebrity chef in like a private apartment in New York, and we're bringing in circus performers, and we're like going to just have kind of a weird circus performance going on in the background of this dinner. And it's like, my team's like, this is so like why? And I'm like, because everyone's going to talk about it.
Yeah.
So stuff like that, or partnering with like really interesting people. I'm thinking of New York in particular right now, because I've been focusing on that region a bit, but like Othership is this incredible wellness club that I have this whole, they opened me up to this new idea where I'm like, I haven't been drinking for like 8 months.
Amazing.
And thank you. And I struggle to find like stuff that I want to do because I'm just not in the party MO. Like I don't want to go out to like, I don't know, a super loud club or whatever. And it's like, what can I do that's still like going out on a Friday night and being with friends, right? And so
no more out Irish.
Yeah,
rover.
my Irish rovering. Yeah. It's not, there's different eras. There's different eras. Like I haven't been feeling it for some reason. So
that's awesome.
Different seasons of life. So I went to this, and I would describe it as a wellness nightclub. Like you walk in and it's like sauna and cold plunges and
holy shit.
Yeah, and like and like the bougiest, like you feel like you're in a super bougie like luxury membership club, right?
Oh.
You walk in, there's like a whole luxury like locker room area, and then you go into the main space, and there's sort of this seating area that's super comfy with like a glass cylinder in the middle with like flames shooting up and down it, and low lighting but very glowy. And then there's a 90-person sauna with these like lights that are very nightclubby going around, and then this low like cold plunge area that's like so nice with like stone floors and pools in the ground. And anyways, all this to say, you do the 75-minute session that in itself is incredible, but at the end of it you feel high as fuck because you've been sauna to cold plunge to sauna, and so your brain is just like, you're not gonna have a hangover, and you feel great, and you feel really like open.
Yeah.
And then you're around 60 other people that you just did that class with, and everyone is like, what the fuck did we just do? Also, everyone feels high. And so you make friends.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is the next big trend, is like wellness nightclubs. I think this is where stuff's going. So anyways, all that to say, that's like another type of event we do. But basically day to day, it's kind of my favorite part of my job is talking to people like the owner of Othership and people who are doing interesting out there things.
Yeah.
And being like, how are you thinking about this, whatever, and getting to talk to people and make friends, and then being like, let's throw an event together and let's just make it up and combine I think you and you would be really cool together. Like, let's
For
take
sure.
the circus performers and put them in the nightclub. And yeah, and so that's like 60% of my role, and then the other half is I get to just talk to members of the community who are like incredible entrepreneurs from all walks of life, and hang out with my team who are homies, and it's a great time.
So the company itself is a way for tech entrepreneurs, high-level entrepreneurs. Is it like any level? Is there a membership to get into the program?
So there's a lot of sort of baseline requirements that you need to hit in order to qualify. And then past that, it's kind of like an interview process to get in. And really the biggest value prop is just like, it's really fucking lonely to be an entrepreneur sometimes. Like, you know.
Someone recently said something to me that made so much sense. They said, the 1% is the loneliest place on the planet. Because there's only,
definitely.
If you think about, 7 or 8 billion people, or however many people live on this planet, 1% of those, that's a very small number in the grand scheme of things that are spread out around the world. And maybe 1% of the planet truly understands you.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because an entrepreneurial space is like such a unique lifestyle to choose, right?
Yeah.
Like you are by nature choosing to go against the grain, and as much as people kind of know that and hear that as like in the zeitgeist, it's like actually experiencing it and being the person who's receiving all of this like negative feedback, or you have a business idea and people are like, that's not going to work. I mean, I always think about the Airbnb guys who at one point, like, the business was completely failing and they were selling cereal boxes in order to keep it alive and keep going. And now people are like, oh, that's so cool. But at the time, I'm sure they felt, it was a struggle,
crazy,
right? Yeah. So you have to kind of be a little crazy
to
do this shit.
For sure.
And finding other people who can relate to just this mindset of like, I want to break norms all the time and deal with people giving me like bad feedback, and then other people giving me like too much good feedback and not actually being honest. It's a weird space to sit in.
Yeah. So. I've always found that, like, my brother is part of that. My brother Nathan, who I'm staying with here in DC, is part of that like very, very high level entrepreneurial lifestyle. And like looking from afar, I always think like, oh man, he has like so many friends and connections, and a lot of it has to do with business.
Yeah.
And
totally.
I often think like, man, I wish I could connect him with just like everyday people, and he does connect with everyday people. But there's that weird like disconnect, you know what I mean, between people that are living like a certain way. If I went to go speak to Jeff Bezos right now, I probably wouldn't understand anything he's going through, or any of these like super high level entrepreneurs. You don't even know what's going through their head, or how the fuck do you send a car into space with SpaceX? Like, these guys are on such a different level that I think for the normal human being, they seem unapproachable. And Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or any of these like high-level guys, probably all they want to do to a certain extent in the back of their mind is connect with like everyday people. And maybe that's not even true, but
yeah, I don't know. I guess I just think about like this idea of you want to be around people who are doing similar stuff to you. I think that's true of anyone at any point in their life. If you're skiing all the time and you don't have a job and you're chilling and you want to be around other people who have like open time to ski with you, right?
Yeah,
and if you're hustling 24/7 and running a business and you want to be around other people who are doing that, or if you've already like sold a business and you want to be around other people who are on that side of things and struggling with like, oh fuck, like my identity was in my business for 2 years and that was like so much of what I cared about, and now what
now it's gone.
Fill that time with. Like, how do I reconfigure a sense of identity within myself? And kind of these interesting psychological questions of just everyone has their own struggles, and so how do you find people who can relate and connect? Because we all just want to be in connection, right? Like everyone wants to be able to like find people they feel seen by.
Yeah. My favorite term in history that has a lot more to do with like addiction, but I heard in TED Talk once a guy said the opposite of addiction is connection. And that term can be used in like so many different facets of life. The opposite of mental health is connection. The opposite of like community and connecting with another human being it's crazy, but it's like the only known thing to help an alcoholic or a drug addict. There's no magic pill.
Can I just say, I hate when people are like, there's like sometimes the self-love culture, like I think goes off the rails where it's like, basically like, if you just love yourself, everything else will be fixed, right? And I'm like, you love yourself by being in connection with other people and like feeling love both ways. Like sometimes there are times that you don't love yourself and people love you, and that helps you get to the other side of it.
If that person can love me, I can love me too.
And it helps you feel like see yourself clearly when you're in like a blurrier space too. If someone else
for sure
see you and remember like all of the best qualities of you. So
I've been in that dark space before where I definitely wasn't loving Austin, and friends and family and therapists or some level of connection or community are the reason that I was able to get to a point that I was like, oh man, Austin is pretty cool. I love who I am. Mm-hmm. I can say that now I love who I am. Could I say that 8 years ago when I was like on the streets and like, no, I truly didn't. Like I was in a dark place, but connection and community saved my life.
So I've been thinking about this a lot from the perspective of like, so as someone who works in the community space, it's, an easy question of like, how do you end up in the community space? Because you're someone who was really fucking lonely as a kid. And you wanted to build community around you. And so for me, it's like an outlet for, it's an interesting, it's like, I think I've heard some quote before that's like your biggest weakness is also your biggest strength. Or your biggest wound is your biggest medicine. I had like such a crippling level of like loneliness, and that manifested in such a desire to connect with other people that it's almost explosive and comes out of me. And it's interesting to think about when I was younger, that manifested as like codependency or kind of really intense friendships. And then when I figured out that I could sort of be in a community facing position and spread that level of like explosive, I want to connect with people to like 800 people. It worked a lot. It was a lot healthier for me, right? So, I was actually thinking about this earlier. I had two friends. I'm sure they wouldn't even remember this, but when I was like 20, a couple childhood friends I was sitting with in an apartment, and they were like, one of them was just like, I think I've made all the friends that I need to make. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, I've made the good friends that I need for life. And like, that's it. Like, I don't really feel a need to like expand out or meet more people. And I don't know why I remember that so starkly, but I was so confused staring at him because I was like, what the fuck do you mean? Like, I never get sick of meeting new people and connecting with new people and hearing their story and finding out new parts of life that I didn't even know existed through other people's
comfort.
Stuff. It's comfort. It's cool. It's curiosity. It's learning. Like, it's the joys of life.
And I think to your friend's meaning behind that, I think that was his comfort, was like, maybe it was difficult for him to like go out and meet new people, and he had his really solid crew, and he was like, you know what?
I'm good.
I'm good. I'm tired of like going out and meeting people. But as my crazy New Yorker therapist that saved my life would say, is you better get comfortable being uncomfortable, you fucking cocksucker.
Word. Preach.
He would be like, I grew up at the corner of 23rd and Lexington. I went to the University of 23rd in Lexington. I'm from the streets. I got comfortable being uncomfortable, motherfucker. And I'd be like, all right, Woody, you got it, man. Got you. And I think a lot of human beings go through life being comfortable and never going beyond that. People,
I don't know if you feel this, but in some ways I go back and forth on my relationship to that, because I feel jealous in some ways, because I'm like, that means that you actually are good where you're at, right? Like theoretically, part of my nomadicism is definitely like always a desire to grow and learn more, and that's a double-edged sword. It means like that I often outgrow places or friends or times of my life, things that I'm learning about. I'm really into this, and then it's not really a part of my life anymore, and it can feel confusing to navigate so many different. I always think about it internally. Like I studied internal family systems, IFS, and archetypes, which are kind of like two words for the same thing, but it's this idea of like we have different parts of ourselves, right? Like you talk about it that way. Part of me is a skier, part of me is a podcaster, whatever. And it's sort of visualizing them as like literal like figures, right? So there's like me as a community manager, me as an artist, like the different parts of me. And I see it when people say like, can people change? To me, it's like those base parts of me don't change. Like they're still there, which means like old friends are always going to be able to connect with me because they can always reach those parts. It just means I'm inviting in new parts, right?
Yeah.
Like I've never skied before, but maybe one day if I go skiing, there'll be like a skier Margaret that is now present. Or like if I try something like piano is new for me and I've been learning that the last 8 months. And that's like, oh, it's like I've never done music before. I'm learning music theory from scratch. And it's like, oh, musician Margaret. And so it's just more parts of myself, which allow me to like belong and connect with more people.
I love that. That is, oh man, I missed you, Margaret.
I miss you too.
So I've gotten to this point in my life where, to that point that I feel like at times I've connected with human beings that only connect with one of those figures. And I think that's it's been an interesting thing, especially we were like talking about it earlier, like as the podcast has grown, as like my social media presence has grown, people are like, they know me as the skier Austin.
Sure.
Or they know me as the podcaster Austin. And those are like they're larger parts of my life, but they're not like who I am to the core. And I've had romantic relationships, I've had friendships over the last few years that have almost like hurt me in a sense because they see this level of like, whether it's success or whatever, they're like attracted to one or two of those figures. And then the
story of my life.
Yeah. And they start to see like who I am as a person, which like I have no problem with who I am as a person, but maybe they didn't like jive with that. And it's almost hurtful because you start to connect with these people.
Yeah, and you feel you get. I mean, it's a rejection, right? Rejection fucking sucks. I relate to that in the sense of like the way I think about it is similarly for me, like my community manager self and this event person, I think of like a fairy godmother archetype. I get to like come in, drop magic on people, put together cool stuff, and share a lot. And I think often, similarly, people mistake that as like 100% of my personality because when it's present, it's so large in a room. That like it seems like that's who I am to the core, right? And it's interesting because it really internally has the same takes up the same level of space as every other part of me. It just is externally present a lot more. And so I have also found in dating particularly, it's like people recognize that and connect to that, and then when they get deeper in with me and there's like shit like everyone else has, family shit and life shit and like that I can be someone who can really get upset or like really have a lot of vulnerability or, has needs or has anxiety or has stress, like that they're like, wait, you're not just like this fun character all the time. Like, ooh, never mind. And I'm like, fuck you, man. Of course I'm a human. Like, what do you mean?
Exactly.
So I feel you.
It's a weird thing that this happens every year during ski season. Like ski season goes away here in North America, and like a lot of people will then end up like in the higher ski community, either go to South America or Oregon to ski the glacier or whatever, and they like continue that all year round. But like that's not something I do. I try and like cut my year up where it's like, okay, now I'm gonna like enjoy being home and being present and not traveling, and it's almost like that figurehead, as using your metaphor, it's like taking that figure away. And it's a weird, like, it's almost like separation anxiety in a sense. This morning, I woke up here in DC. I'm like, cool, I get to go see Margaret, see Varun later. I got my little nephew here that I'm meeting for the first time, and all these things are exciting. But there was that piece of me that was like, oh man, like I just saw on Instagram my buddy's skiing in the high country in Colorado, and I'm like, shit, should I have like waited to come out to DC? I like planned this trip because my winters are crazy busy, and I thought like, all right, mid-June, I can come out to DC, meet my nephew, see the family, see you, see friends, like do these things. But there's always that like piece of me in the background that's like, oh man, that little figure is not next to me. And
also, that's such a skier thing.
No,
my best friend in Park City, it's like if he's not skiing, he's like, fuck, I'm in the wrong place.
Yeah, no, and it's
I feel you.
It's a weird, and I think a lot of people experience that with things like outside of skiing. There's that like level of like separation where you identify with that thing so much. And like, to your point, then people in your community will identify with that singular figure.
I struggle with this so much.
Yeah.
It's like,
they
people
know,
like don't identify with your job, and you're like, but it's a huge part of my fucking life. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah. Something I've always appreciated about you, you're excited about your job, but you don't let it fully consume you.
It depends on the day. But yes.
Yeah.
That's true.
I've had friends, exes, that's their entire identity. Mm-hmm. That's their one figure.
Yeah.
And like
figurehead, I think, is a great term for that.
Yeah. Like, it's their singular figurehead is their work. And it's like, you got to have other things. And like, you have so many different things going in your life right now that I totally understand, like, that idea that people identify with you as the bubbly, out there community manager person, but you're a human being. You want to come home and play piano, or we've got French.
Or like cry in my bed watching a rom-com. That happens a lot.
Yeah. Same. Yeah, same. Yeah, word up.
I guess I think a lot about, so part of that's like a huge part of the reframe for me has been this idea around parts. And then I also like, I guess, the ideal world is one in which you're like fully expressed, right? Which I think means all parts of you are present and firing, and whether that means being seen for all parts of you or just getting to like access all parts of you in a day. And I guess that would mean, there's certain parts of me met by my job, maybe by playing piano, maybe by talking to a friend on Fortnite, maybe by watching a movie. And it's like, do you hit all of the parts of you that need to be seen within a week? And like, or do some get ignored? And I guess I wonder around, like, is there any world where you are fully expressed, or is that kind of a constant thing that's part of being human, is trying to get there all the time, but it's sort of like a carrot in front? I don't know the answer to that.
Me neither.
Yeah.
And I think
do you identify as do you identify as multi-hyphenate or like multi-passionate?
My God.
I call it, there's so many different names that I think are the same thing, like ADHD, manifesting generator, multi-hyphenate, like it's all the same thing, which is like, we have a lot of things that we like to do.
I mean, we were saying this downstairs before the podcast that like, there's this like free flowing idea space. And I think this just has to do with like, I hate this term, but like creatives.
Artists, creatives. I mean, there's a reason those are the terms, right?
Yeah.
Just because like, I want to do all the things.
Yeah.
And I want it to, like, it's going to come through me and out, and like, it just is what it is.
Yeah. I think as like creatives, there's like always these different paths that you can think of. I was downstairs thinking, you were like, I don't really know what to do moving forward. And I'm literally thinking to myself, I was like, man, me, you, and Varun should talk tonight, and we should come up with, because you're like a community manager and like connecting with people. I was like, and I have been saying to my friends forever, I really want to start like a sober living or get into like the mental health space in another aspect. And I was like, oh man, me, you, and Varun, he's a software engineer. He can build the app and we connect people.
Okay, I've started to learn this is just like how my brain works, right? And so when I was younger, one of my larger wounds and guilts is like every time I have a new idea and I get excited about it, and truthfully, like I follow through on all of them, and I do them, and I do them successfully, but like there's a lot of guilt from the parental generation who like they didn't live that way, and so it doesn't totally make sense to them, where they're like, get a consistent job, and I'm like,
take the salary,
and I'm like, but also like by jumping around, I've been able to learn so many things, and it's how I've landed in a job that I fucking love by like getting to learn I don't think anyone thought that my 3-month energy healing course was relevant for a career, and yet now I work in wellness programming. So it's like, fuck you guys.
Yeah.
Or like learning about tarot cards, and like I did so much witchy shit for a year that I thought was just sort of this, side passion. Or even my friend taught me Fortnite, and now like I've run, witchy stuff for entrepreneurs. I've run Fortnite sessions for entrepreneurs. Like it's like all folded into stuff I can do for work, which is cool. Yeah. That's a whole separate conversation about burnout and bringing everything I do into the work funnel, but for another time. Godspeed. But it's like the brain always being like, oh, and this would be cool, and that would be cool. And it's being seated in like, oh, I think I'm professionally curious and interested in trying things. And that's what my Because I always feel like, oh, is this the thing? Like I found my thing that I'm going to do forever. And I'm like, I think the thing is trying different things.
For sure. I haven't heard it that way, and I fucking love that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great. That's a Margaret classic right there. That's nice. That's gonna go in the quote book. Something you brought up about like parents. I think maybe it's a 50-50 split that some people, they turn 18 and they're like disconnected from their family, and then I think you and I grew up in a similar way where our parents were like very go-getters and like you need to reach this like certain level of success and you need to go to a good school and you need to have a good job. And yeah. And a lot of people that have not experienced that, I think, look on and they're like, oh, just fuck what your parents think. Like, just go live your life. And I've done that to a certain extent, like a major extent, but that is like a stressful thing. I was telling you earlier, like I've been getting some job offers recently where people are like, in a sense, kind of poaching me from what I'm doing in terms of the podcast and the creative agency and skiing and all this stuff, and almost giving me offers like I feel like I can't say no to.
Yeah.
And that goes against what I said earlier, like getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. That is comfort to me. Like the uncomfortable is, oh shit, how am I going to pay the mortgage this month? I really need to network. I need to bring in a new client. I need to work on a project. Oh man, that project that I've kind of had on the back burner, why don't I finish that so I can get paid? Things like that are the uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
And I think it's really cool what you've done, like hopping around to like get to something that you love, and going against maybe what the family really wants.
I feel like I can say that when I took the abroad job, my mom like cried and was like, can you just like get married or something? And I'm like,
yeah,
what the fuck? I'm like, what do you mean? Yeah, I think it's something that I battle with constantly. Like there were times last year that I loved my job, but it was also like the most burnt out I had felt, because for me, like working remote is really important because I show up in such an extroverted way when I'm at these events that I'm like introverted when I'm doing my work. I just want to quietly be on my computer, like doing stuff and getting stuff done. Yeah. So that I have the energy for these like really large extroverted moments. And so I was just so burnt out. I was like burning the candle at both ends, and I like, had a total meltdown. And I was like, but I can't quit because I'm going to be a failure, right? Like that voice is so huge for me. Coming from like stuff that I grew up around, and it's not even just family. It's also like I grew up in Connecticut, and it was around all these people who were like super successful. And there's this weird bifurcation of like either get this amazing job and be successful in kind of a more traditional sense, or if you're going to be the entrepreneur and go your route, like it's not cool until you're super successful, and then it's like, oh my god, you're amazing, like, and now you've hit the successful in a different way. And I don't know, there's so many weird pressures that are built into that, and navigating that internal landscape, which at this point is like, it really is just what I had to kind of learn for myself in therapy in the past year was like, I was like getting mad at my mom because I was feeling this pressure, and she was like, I'm literally not like pushing any pressure on you. You're like, you can quit, like you can do whatever you want. And I was like, but I feel pressure from you. And I was like, oh, it's like childhood pressure, right? It's like there's two versions of her that are present in my head. There's the version that kind of got integrated into my own psyche, and then the like reality one. And when they're both present in the same moment, I like melt down. And it's not her fault, right? Like present day her isn't doing that, but it's some built-in old stuff and stuff that I heard a lot. And I don't know. It sucks that our internal narratives are come like an amalgamation of voices that we didn't choose necessarily.
For sure. Like this recent job that I had on the table, my family was like, take it.
Yeah,
like
of course, my family would be like, fucking take it immediately. Shut up and sign the contract. Like, let's go.
And when it didn't like go that route, I could just like, you can like hear it like in your family's voice, and it's like,
it's tough.
Yeah. But I've also gotten to a point, especially being like the black sheep, drug addict, junkie, all these words that I can use about myself now. Being that also ingrained something in my head that it was like, I'm never going to be that. So why don't I just like lean into the other part of this? Why don't I'm never going to be the Ivy League super successful. I feel super successful in my own way. And maybe that's not measurable to my family in a sense, but it's measurable to me internally.
Yeah.
Like
Especially
I'm sitting,
if you've been through it, like you know what it looks like to like be down and what it looks like to be like, wow, I'm happy with myself. Like, that contrast is stark.
Yeah. And my success, I measure sitting across from you, a friend, having a conversation, having the ability to fly to DC to see my family. These were all things that were not possible.
Well, this is this question of like, how do you define success, right? And
Yeah.
like that answer, if you asked me it every year for the last 10 years, I think I'd answer something different. 'Cause
Same.
it changes with time, right? Like right now, being able to have freedom, like remote flexibility, location flexibility, that to me is like such a measure of success and something I value so much. Obviously, you know, the basics, right?
For sure.
Hierarchy of needs, being able to cover your rent and food and all that. But beyond that, I'm like, just being able to, hop a plane to go see a really good friend and get to spend a week somewhere else. Because for me, so much of my inspiration and happiness comes from travel and seeing other places.
Yeah.
And such different parts of me come forward in different places that like,
Absolutely.
that's how I meet all those internal needs that I'm trying to meet.
Yeah. And I'm the exact same way. I need my basic needs covered. And anything after that is just, that's where I measure a lot of my success, to be honest, is like, if I feel happy throughout my day, if I connect with a friend, if I go out to dinner and do like with friends and have that connection, I feel fulfilled. And I feel like my success in a lot of ways, like that's success to me.
Yeah.
But where I feel like extra successful is what comes like after that. Like, was I able to record a podcast? Like beyond my basic needs, could I record a podcast?
Somebody once said to me, you like, it's kind of like, you know, little kids, there's like the measuring stick on the wall as they're growing up and you put the little markers.
Yeah.
And like when you're with someone, you don't see their growth, but then a friend comes and they're like, wow, you've like grown so much. Right.
Yeah.
And I think of that too emotionally, where it's like sometimes I don't feel like I've grown at all. And then I have moments that I almost call like time travel. Like last week, I saw like an ex and it was just like immediately back into my 24-year-old consciousness and feeling so disempowered and shitty about myself and crazy and like all these feelings that I never feel anymore. And it was actually really cool because it was like a one-off, you know, ran into him at an airport, literally like one-off instance for a night. And then I wake up the next morning in my adult consciousness and I was like, weird. Because I don't care in my adult consciousness as much. Like I got activated in the moment being in presence with someone. But B, I was like, oh, I don't feel that way about myself anymore. And I didn't even realize how bad it was back then. And then how much I feel different now because it happened so slowly.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm curious where your inner critic has been coming up for you lately. Because this is something that I've been thinking about a lot. And I'll preface where it's coming up for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a few different places, like A is trying new creative pursuits, right? Like we were talking about this earlier where starting a podcast for me has been on the back burner for years. And there was always just kind of this like vague resistance that I didn't look at that much where I was like, I really feel like I should do that. And then I'd be like, eh. And it kind of has been realizing that I have a large critic around a fear of being seen. That's like huge for me. Like I had a lot of trauma in my childhood and stuff that really fucked with me, including an ex who used to like film people without them knowing about it. It's like a very literal fear of like you know, being seen and being taped. And then in addition to that, I've been finding like an interesting part of my brain that I'm really exploring right now is the critic coming up in spaces that I actually really enjoy. So like I'm into really weird woo-woo witchy shit, right? Like I'm in LA last week and we're at a co-working space and somebody, no joke, this dude like comes up on the stage, rings a gong and is like, the cacao ceremony will now start in the back room. And my friend and I were like, are we going? Like, what the fuck is this? We have to go in there, right?
Yeah.
So we go back there and it's like, I mean, it's like comical and yet amazed. Like it's again, these two parts of my brain are present where I'm like so judgy and also fucking love it. Like this dude is playing the ukulele. We're singing about like love and the elements, whatever you think like of LA, it's that in epitome. And then drinking cacao together and everyone sharing how they feel, whatever. And there was a part of my brain that was in the corner of the room just like laughing, like dying laughing at the whole thing, being like, what the fuck? And then another part of me that was like, I fucking love this.
Yeah.
Is it okay for me to love this? Like, why do I love this? This is embarrassing. And fighting against that sort of like being in environments where I both feel a sense of belonging and then sort of separate. And I'm like, but this isn't me. You know, I'm just here, but like, it's not me.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
To answer your question, my inner critic comes in a lot of ways, and I think the pretty severe childhood trauma that I have into drug addiction, into my injury, and like all of these things have like knocked down self-confidence pretty far to where I've been building that back up. And we talked about it earlier today. You know, something goes viral on Instagram and people just start commenting like,
it's fucking crazy.
Yeah, like
it's crazy.
And we discussed how I have like over time, like I turn off the notifications on Instagram and like I don't want to even like see it. Yeah. Which is weird because then there's also people that are like reaching out and like, hey,
they're awesome.
Yeah, they're like awesome and like wanting to connect with you. And those are the comments that I want to see. So
there's no way to like auto filter. You know? Like, can you always show me nice people who I want to like hang out with?
Zuckerberg, call out. Let's get a little AI into Facebook and Instagram.
For saying that this is like, you know, epitome of freedom of speech here. I mean, like, talk your shit. I just don't want to see it. Everyone else can see it.
Yeah, and as hard as it is to like read certain things or just people just like actually just being mean.
Yeah.
I have two rules in life. I tell people this all the time, especially on first dates. Where
are we going with this?
Well, I'm just saying that like it's a big part of me that these two rules in my life are
I
like.
I want to hear them now.
So my first rule is you can believe in whatever the fuck you want to believe in. Any social issue, any politics, religion, sex, color, creed, gender, anything. You can believe in anything you want. Just don't jam it down my throat. So the way that I look at that is like we can have a conversation about it, but the second someone starts being like super pushy, like you need to think this way, you need to believe this, I shut down. I'm like, okay, I understand that you think that way, but you don't need to like really jam it down my throat.
This podcast brought to you by ADHD.
Yes, exactly. So my second rule is don't be mean. And they, in a sense, work on each other.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times in certain issues, politics, like you can be Republican or you can be liberal, and a Republican can be like, you have to think this way, and then it turns into mean things, like, or the other side, you could be liberal and like telling a conservative like, you have to think this way, and then instead of it being a conversation of like, I think this way because X, Y, and Z, maybe you should think this way because of X, Y, and Z.
I mean, it's funny because like for me, this is like so again like about parts work where it's just like, yeah, I grew up in a family where there was like a lot of conflict and yelling and screaming, and I emotionally shut down if I perceive conflict in any regard. And so if that would be one version of it, right? Like there is an opinion coming at me aggressively that we might disagree on. My body perceives that as conflict and I completely shut down. And so I go into like fawn response of just trying to like calm everyone down and be like, validate without agreeing and change the subject. I'm
the exact same way. And so those are like two very important things in my life that you go through life and like, honestly, a lot of people are like mean. They're just like,
it's so interesting to me. I mean, everyone's different, right? I have people in my life who have like anger stuff, and it's so interesting because it's like, I believe that everyone's emotions are valid. And so I go through a weird Olympics where I'm like, well, their anger is valid. But when they get angry and I perceive that, like I can't be in connection with you. Like I shut down and it's so scary to me.
I'm the same way.
But it's so weird because I'm like, I understand that you're right to be angry, but to me, I really struggle with that emotion. I struggle to express that emotion too. Like it doesn't come out well for me. But like, I'm like, you're valid to be angry, but it feels like a violent emotion to me. Like it feels like it's suddenly my responsibility and it's coming at me, right? And attacking me, not literally, but like energetically. And so then it feels like it's not a fair emotion to have at me, even though it is. And so like I go through my own battles with that, but I always think about I have my own couple rules. Like the don't be mean is like so basic. Don't be an asshole. Like in terms of work, Tory Burch was the first place I ever had a real job, and she said to us all the time, negativity is noise. That was like her number one rule.
Negativity is what?
Noise. It's just noise.
Negativity is noise.
It's just background noise. It's like a radio station in the background. You can change the radio station, just like it's just noise.
I love that.
Yeah, and then I always just think about this was something we learned as a facilitator at that abroad program. They always said, if someone says no to something, whatever it is, the proper response is thank you for taking care of yourself. I live by that. And like no one says that, and it feels so good to hear. Like it can feel really guilty to say no to social plans if you're burnt out or something. And it feels so nice if you're like, I'm sorry, I like can't make it, but you feel really fucking guilty.
Naveed, I'm sorry.
And someone's like, cool, thank you for taking care of yourself. And it's like, oh. Yeah. That feels like a warm hug emotionally. And I say that to everyone whenever someone, because I used to, get really guilted either internally or externally about, especially when you're in college, you get the peer pressure of like, no man, but we're going out partying, like let's go. And I'm like, I went out 4 nights in a row, like Godspeed, I can't do it tonight. Yeah. But I have FOMO, so you probably could peer pressure me into this. But
yeah. I've gotten a lot better throughout the years at saying no.
It's so fucking hard.
Oh my.
People talk about that, but like it really is fucking hard.
I'm a people pleaser.
Preach.
Yeah. Like I will go at times out of my way at my own discomfort to make somebody else happy. Mm-hmm. Like if it's really important, something's really important, even if I don't want to go, I'll show up. Same. Because I know how important it is to that person. Mm-hmm. But for like everyday plans, and the reason I said sorry, Naveed, is Naveed, good friend of mine, is always planning. And I love that about him. He's constantly trying to get the group together and community. And sometimes I just like, no. Yeah. I just put up that wall. And I love that kind of quote. Like, thank you for thinking of yourself.
Thank you, Spencer Jench, my former CEO. Brilliant. Came from him.
Yeah. That's an interesting way of looking at it, because often when I do say no,
care, right? It's like you're saying no, and I'm saying I see you that you like need to take care of yourself. Yeah, and I respect that, and I love you. Like, go do that, right? Yeah,
and man, as a people pleaser, saying no like actually makes me nauseous at times.
True.
I just recently did that with like a romantic thing going on. Finally had to like put up that wall. I was nauseous so hard for days. Like
prior or after, or both?
Both.
I'm like prior for me. It's like up until that moment where I have to have a more vulnerable conversation where I'm like setting a boundary. It feels like I'm dying. Yeah. Like I'm like, I'd literally rather do anything else on earth. I will bungee jump. I will jump out of a plane. Don't make me have this conversation.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess the more I think about it, it's not really after, because after I'm like, whoa, that was actually way easier than I thought.
It's always easier. But again, it's like my conflict trauma. I'm like, I'm going to die.
Yeah. Yeah, I had the conversation, and it just like went way smoother than I expected. And like, that's part of life. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to say no to things, especially if it like doesn't feel right. So we say
you're single right now, Austin?
Take note. Yeah, single. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Take note, lady.
Getting used to saying no has been, I think, my greatest push in my like self-development.
I think I'm still like a long road ahead of me.
Oh, and I am too. I think for you and I, or like people pleaser types, that's something we'll deal with for the rest of our lives. There will always be that feeling of like,
it's a strength and a weakness, I think, in some ways. Like, part of the way that I perform at such a high level in the work that I do is out of being a people pleaser, right? Like there's so many people in hospitality that are people pleasers, and I see it as a really healthy manifestation of that trait. Like it's a way to express it in a helpful way instead of like in a way that can potentially, I think when I was younger, I really saw it as, I was kind of a martyr about it. Like if someone didn't want my help or when I was like trying to offer it or going out of my way or not saying no to things, and then I'd be insulted if they were like, back off. I was like, how dare you? Like, I'm just being a nice person. And now I'm like, oh, like I can see that actually that can be overbearing. That can be annoying. That can be frustrating. Like sometimes people need space and that's just how they process things. And it's different than the way that I do or I think.
Yeah.
And it's like, I need to understand that and respect that just as much as like the way that I need to be in connection, whatever, like my anxious attachment, and that everyone just has their own ways of doing things. But yes, lifelong process that has its pros and cons, I think.
Yeah, I'm slowly getting better at it. And at times, I think that if I am saying yes all the time, the new doors and opportunities are going to open for me.
Totally that, especially like in the entrepreneurial space and the
it's like that FOMO field. You were saying.
Yeah. It's like, if I go to this thing or if I say yes to this project and they like me, maybe they'll introduce me to someone or maybe like it'll be opening up, new doors, like because everything opens up different doors and takes you down different paths, and it's being selective about that is hard. Yeah. And I try to just remember that like if I'm feeling a no, like I really just had to spend a lot of time somatically figuring out what the emotion is when I felt a body yes or a body no and what that was, and then just learning to trust and respect that. Because if it's a no, even if it feels like an amazing job offer, I think it sometimes manifests in interesting ways. There was one that I said no to. I felt like such a overwhelming no, and I it was an amazing offer. Fought my family on it because they were like, take the damn offer, and I was like, I don't know, something about it feels wrong. And I said no, and they offered me like 20% more. And I was like, oh, that's why I needed to say no, was like, there was, that. And then in other instances, the times I've ignored myself and gone with it anyways, it's like people I ultimately don't like. And something in my subconscious picked up on that early, and we didn't work well together. And it wasn't, so a lot of gut feelings there.
Yeah. I've been rolling with the gut recently.
We're rolling with the gut.
Yeah, we're rolling with the gut. And I think friends, I think family, especially when it comes to like romantic relationships, have helped me in that way. Because sometimes you feel like you can't trust your gut, and it's like,
totally.
Well, just give it a few more weeks or a month or whatever and see how it feels then. And it's like, I've done that for actually years at a time. I've done that for I was in a relationship I shouldn't have been for many years. And you finally get to that point where you're like, holy shit, the last 4 years of my life were horrible. Like, why did I do that to myself? And now I'm like, you know what? That is not how I want to live my life.
Yeah.
And I think friends and family can help you get to that point sooner, and saying oh, we see that too. Like you're not crazy, or you're not thinking this.
The clearer you are in your own feelings too, it's like people also perceive it more clearly when they're talking to you. And I think, I've been single for years now, and so much of that was recovery from exactly that issue of having some stuff that I thought was a yes, and I really felt completely betrayed and blindsided by, and spending a lot of years in varying ways, whether that was therapy or really for me was getting into a lot of the intuition work. And the reason that I like, tarot cards or energy healing or whatever, because all of it is about it doesn't matter what the person who's reading for you thinks. It's what comes up for you, right?
Yeah.
And so it was actually just a constant exercise for 3 years, and what's going on in your brain, and do you trust it?
Yeah.
And doing that over and over again every day, every time you pull a card, and figuring out what that first voice is before the layered, stories and the inner critic and all the other stuff layers onto it.
Do you do a tarot card every day?
I would say definitely once a week I have a ritual. I would say every few days probably.
Okay.
Yeah. I have a deck next to my bed.
Love it.
We love it.
Love it. Can you read my tarot?
Yeah, you want me to?
Yeah.
I have a deck I made that I haven't published yet.
Amazing.
So I can pull from my own deck for you.
I love it.
We love it.
I love that.
But yeah, it's really about working with your own brain, which is like so much of my belief system is like empowering people to figure out how to feel good in whatever they're doing and not listen to the 80,000 voices.
Yeah.
Because it's noise. It's noise.
God, Tory Burch. Wow.
Tory Burch.
That's my gal now.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Negativity is noise. Were you able to work like directly with her?
So I was an intern at the time on the creative team for 2 summers. Like, it's so funny. It was the first job I ever had. Best job. Set me up for everything else I ever did after that.
That's what internships should do.
Yeah, it was like the dream, and we got paid. We loved that.
Bless.
A dream. But yeah, dream job in so many ways. The office was incredible.
Yeah.
I had a bunch of sessions with like Tori coming in and talking to the interns. I worked on a special project. She was putting out a book at the time called Tory Burch in Color. That was like a coffee table book.
Wow.
And we were the team that was sitting there sifting through 60,000 photos in her archives, organizing them by who, what, where, when, why, organizing them by color. There was a point where my boss was on the floor of her office with, I think, literally like 10,000 photos spread out on this floor, and Tori walking around being like, that one and that one and that one. And it was incredible. It was a scene.
Wow.
But they taught me so much about like aesthetic and mindset and feeling empowered as a woman, which is so much of her messaging. She has like the Tory Burch Foundation, which empowers like women entrepreneurs. And landing with cool mentors. Like, I am the biggest believer in the world in mentors. Even when you're not literally working directly with them, I think you can learn from people who you admire and feel into their energy and learn from it through podcasts, through
for sure
subscribed classes, through whatever articles you read about them. Like,
without a doubt, that's what my brother's been to me. My brother Nathan.
I was gonna ask who your people are.
Yeah. My brother Nathan has been my biggest inspiration since I was a kid.
That's incredible.
And like having that wealth of knowledge, he's built a massive PR agency here in DC. They've got offices all around the world now. He's got tons of employees. They are the PR agency for the entire country of Qatar. So they did all of the FIFA World Cup and all of the PR around the World Cup. And
how would you describe him like as a person?
Amazing. I don't know how to. I don't even know how to put it into words. Probably the most caring and generous human being I've ever met. You would meet my brother, which you'll meet him later on, and you'll think to yourself, like, you don't think that he, like, is flaunting his, like, wealth or he's extremely successful, but he would never, like, push you to believe that, like, you don't walk into a room with him and think, like, oh, man, that's an unapproachable guy. Which, like we were talking about earlier, like, the 1%, I think for a lot of people can feel, like, unapproachable in a sense that people feel intimidated by that, like high caliber success. I walk into a room with my brother and I just think, that's my brother. And he's never, and I can call him at any time. When I got this job offer, he was the first person I called and just asked for like real world business advice.
I'm just hearing a deep level of admiration in someone who will always show up, which is like the most valuable thing.
For sure. And at times, this is my own, here's my inner critic. I think why is my brother showing up, or why do certain people in my life show up? Why do these mentors still believe in me after everything I did to them? After everything I put my brother through, why is he opening up his home to me? Why did he want me to come to DC and meet his new kid? And like, that's my inner critic. And that is such deep-seated past trauma.
Yeah.
That is like, I was living a pretty fucked up lifestyle, and I was like a one-man wrecking crew. And it didn't matter how much admiration and love I had for the person like my brother. Oh my God, the things I put my brother and family through during that time of like addiction and bad mental health and everything, that's my inner critic today. No matter how much success or love or whatever I feel, there's still that like, I don't deserve this. Like, I don't deserve my brother picking up the phone. I don't deserve to be in DC right now. That's my inner critic.
I hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's wild. It's like, I heard someone say like new levels, new devils. It's like no matter what level you're at, there's always different things you're battling.
Yeah.
Or the same stories that you've been battling since you were younger. And it's like fascinating how that shows up. I feel that too. Like I have a lot of worthiness stuff too that can show up in moments of like, I think in my work, I feel generally really confident. But then as it comes to like closer interpersonal relationships, I can be like, do they actually like me? Do they actually want to spend time with me? Like, why,
Yeah.
And it's so weird because then in other areas of my life, I almost think each part has its own confidence level. And
100%.
Yeah, fascinating how that stuff comes up.
And we both are worthy.
I'm like, you say that, my inner critic immediately is like, am I? Literally immediately.
Oh, my inner critic saying it was thinking that.
It's like,
But that's also, actually, I don't like using the word but. Here's a little inner thing. And.
Yeah, I've learned that too.
And, yeah, that's something that I've been trying really. Ex-girlfriend of mine who's a doctor, it was something she learned in med school. It's like anything that comes after but is just bullshit.
Yeah.
So shout out Emma. We're still close and friends, and but that, there's another thing is like learning how to rephrase things. I think the podcast has helped a lot with that. Mm-hmm. Like having conversations with people or learning how to like properly speak and not use words that can be like offensive. Like you never know, like walking into a room or having a certain guest on the podcast, something that you're going to say could have an effect on someone that might not have effect on the next guest.
Right.
So like learning to manage that. And I don't know what I was about to say after but because I've got ADHD.
I was thinking like, I always think about in terms of that worthiness thing and something that is part of my battling in my career right now to put some of my art out there, like stuff that I've made that I just haven't externalized. Is I think of Brene Brown, who talks about like,
oh, I love her.
Yeah. Who doesn't? Like if you're not in the arena, being one of the people putting your shit out there, like it doesn't matter what other people say, right? Like putting your shit out there is fucking terrifying, whether it's a podcast, a book, a piece of art, like a dish if you're a cook, like whatever it is, it's scary to be like, I actually made this from my inner world and I have externalized it, which I think is incredible and terrifying, and it can go so well and so badly. And it's like I mean I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I call it like experience DNA, which is just like witnessing people who can I don't have a better way to describe this, so I keep saying like throw up their inner world onto a space, right? Like there's an empty room and it feels like their inner world like explodes onto it. And I think about everything from, like I talked to the co-founder of House of Yes in Brooklyn this week, who runs this incredible nightclub with acrobatics and circus performers and all kinds of lighting and really wild out there programming. And it's her and her co-founders just like brainchild, right? And everything from that to like Taylor Swift's manifestation of the Tortured Poets Department into the way she turned that into a piece of her show that she calls Female Rage the Musical. And it's like a literal theatrical presentation of this inner emotional turmoil that she went through. And it's wild to me the way people can, in huge ways, like, because everyone wants to feel seen. And the idea of being able to bring all the stuff in your head out is so incredible to me. It's like, that's the stuff that fucking inspires me. So like doing a podcast and talking to people and bringing your inner world into a space that people can hear it, see it, and perceive you. Impressive, man. You're worthy.
Thanks. You too. You just started a podcast.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Yeah. Well, as we were talking about earlier, like pulling off that Band-Aid of doing it the first time is the scariest part.
Scariest fucking part.
How this podcast started, I don't think a lot of people know this.
I don't think I know this.
So I was saying a little bit downstairs, people were like pushing me, like, start your podcast. And it was always there. It was always in the back of my mind. And it was like, oh, I'm going to start that someday. And like, when someday?
Preach.
Yeah. But everyone does that in so many aspects of their life. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if it's a podcast, whatever it is. I'm going to start this painting. I'm going to buy that camera that I've always wanted to take
when I'm retired.
Exactly. All of those things. It's like, I'll do that someday.
Yeah.
Today might be your last day. Like, I don't know. We could get in an Uber after this and get in an accident. Like, who knows? And that's someday I've started to learn in my head is never good enough for me. And like, just do it. So I woke up.
Got some Nike shit going here.
I woke up.
Some days today.
Yeah, some days today, motherfuckers, let's go. I woke up and it was Prime Day. Amazon Prime Day. I literally, Bezos got me. I wake up and I got a notification on my phone that it's like, it's Prime Day. I think it was like in July. And I don't know what came over me. And I was like, I'm starting my podcast. I'm going to buy all
It's
of
weird. One day it just fucking comes through you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like,
I get it.
Oh, it's Prime Day. All of this stuff is going to be on sale.
Yep,
I'm
throw it
buying
in the
mics.
cart.
I'm buying audio equipment. I'm buying everything I need to start this podcast. And it was just, I was like, whoa, this is like, and I did it before I could think twice about it. It was like, I knew everything I wanted. It was in my wish list on Amazon, like every single piece of equipment I needed. I was like, add to cart, 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 and just pressed place order and I was like, whoa, the level of like, I don't know if it was relief or what that I felt like after I just did it. I was like, whoa, that was crazy.
Yeah.
And I called Naveed and I'm like, hey, you know that podcast I've always wanted to start and kind of wanted you to be a producer on and help me with the lighting and you can, we can talk. And he's like, you want to record it today? And I was like, yeah, it's same day delivery. Let's do it. And literally we recorded the first episode. He brought over tons of lighting and I was like, Naveed, sit in on this one. Let's just like shoot the shits. And now he's a part of like a ton of episodes, which has been super fun. Because Naveed and I, in a lot of ways, like we have tons of similarities in terms of like things we're passionate about and like. We lived totally separate lives. He grew up in Bangladesh in a very conservative household, Muslim, like just that's the way he was raised, and went totally off script and was like, I'm going to the United States, I'm going to school in the United States, and like pushed against everything his family did. And like I grew up an American skier, all the like totally different lifestyles. We have a lot of things in common, photography, all this stuff, but it's been fun to like bounce things off of each other, like things he doesn't understand about my childhood or things I can't even begin to understand. Like it's just a literally different world in a sense. A lot of my friends thought Bangladesh was the capital of India, not a tiny country right below India. Bangladesh actually has a massive population.
The more you know.
Yeah. This tiny little country that's like, Naveed and I looked it up. I think it's like 1/18 the size of Colorado, has, I think, 100 times the population of the state of Colorado, and it's that much smaller in terms of land mass. It's crazy. Like 100 and some odd, like 120 million people live only in the capital of Dhaka in Bangladesh. God. It's insane. Literally like 1/3 of the population of the United States.
I'm picture what that actually looks like from a housing perspective.
Everyone lives on top of it. It's insane.
Right. You have to if that's kind of the literal of the land you have. Wild.
It's insane. And don't quote me on those numbers because now I'm thinking, is it 120 million for the whole country? And like, anyways, it's a lot of people in like a very small land mass, but total ADHD brain there. That has been like an interesting thing to bounce things off someone that we lived totally different lives. And yeah, that's how the podcast was started. Like totally Bezos got me.
He comes for us all. Like that fucking Prime button.
Yeah, that Prime button. Oh, it's just so easy.
So good.
Yeah, so good. So, coming up on, we typically try and keep the episodes around an hour and a half. You wouldn't know this, but in like recovery rooms, AA, at the end of meetings, we do something called burning desires. Okay. So essentially what a burning desire is like your last chance to say anything you want to leave with the audience, anything you want to give, advice, business, any tips, anything, just a burning desire, something you want to get off your chest. You could tell us your deepest, darkest secrets.
How deep, dark secrets? Fuck. I'm like, I don't have anything that jumps to mind. I feel like most of my wisdom comes through being in flow state, talking with a friend. So I feel like it's all buried in whatever we just talked about for the last hour. But be yourself.
Yeah.
Right? It's the most cheesy, fucking taboo, dumb phrase on the planet. Like, be yourself, be authentically yourself. You hear it all the time, but I really have been finding it as a felt experience lately of like what it means to, you know, from the experience DNA to talking about the IFS stuff, like showing up 100% as yourself is exactly how you find your people. And that was scary when I was younger because you're in smaller environments, and now we have access to the world through social media and a lot of easier ways to find truly like exactly your people and people who see you and hear you and are so excited to like be in connection. And you know, whether that's through your clothes or what you talk about or how you put yourself out there, like be yourself.
Be yourself.
Be yourself. Someday is today.
Oh,
gotta drop quotes.
Yeah, that was actually a good one.
Came
off cuff there.
There's gonna be my burning desire.
If
someone says no to you, tell them thank you for taking care of yourself. I think the world would be a better place if everyone said that.
Seriously, that level of guilt that people can feel in that moment of saying no
to someone's birthday party.
God, or a wedding. Weddings. Yeah, I've got 4 weddings in October that I cannot say no to.
So you're at a wedding all of October?
Basically. Yeah. Yep.
Well,
I'm very excited for all of them because they're like my closest friends, but it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Very terrifying. So thank you, Margaret, for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Austin.
Absolutely.
Love you.
Yep. Love you too. Yeah. Got you. What's up, guys? Falling Off the Floor episode with special guest Margaret Lefton. We are out.
We out.
Boom.